All right. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. And welcome to FB Bartending School Philippines Toma Session with Richie Cruz. So, most of us probably heard of the news that the enhanced community quarantine has been extended again. Now, like I always say, everything happens for a reason, and we always have to look for the brighter side of things. And indeed, I could not agree more. By the way, my name is Richie Cruz, and head bartender of Cobbler and head trainer of Center for Bartending and Tourism Academy Incorporated. So yeah, shout out to everyone who's here right now. Yeah, so by the way, my name is Richie Cruz, head bartender of Cobbler and bar trainer of Center for Bartending and Tourism Academy. As a bartender, my thirst is never ending when it comes to learning, and one way is talking to actual people that can help quench that thirst. Now, for the aspiring bartenders who are here right now, okay, hold on. We have some technical stuff. So it's my first time to use also Instagram live. So okay, is that okay now? I see Christmas. All right. So again, so take two.
Can you see me, Richie?
Yeah, everything's. I can hear you loud and clear.
Good.
Okay, so as a bartender, my thirst is never ending when it comes to learning, and one way is talking to actual people that can help quench that thirst. For aspiring bartenders, listening and viewing should be more open to learning both locally and globally so that we have the best of both worlds. Now, Toma Session is a program that I put up 2 weeks ago. Toma means drink in Manila, in the Philippines. It's a local term for let's cheers, let's drink to that. So session is actually like a program or a meeting. So I thought of that term. So why not have like a similar platform of those that are doing bar chat or bar talk? So since each of the guests that we have are personally handpicked to me, which I feel that can give us both learning and inspiration as we pursue journey in bartending. Now, last week, actually, I started with Linda, bar manager of Catch Fly in Singapore. And today, so I will not really I will go straight ahead to, because I'm really very excited. It is with great honor and appreciation that we have this chance to host one of the global icons of bartending, the modern father of bartending, the king cocktail. Ladies and gentlemen, here we have Mr. Dale DeGroff. Woo! Well, yeah, hi Dale, thank you, thank you. I really appreciate it. This is a first for all the Philippine bartenders who are viewed right now or tuned in right now. Shout out to Jill,
Right here,
who is pretty
running away
pretty.
in her pajamas.
Yeah, no worries. Pretty instrumental, and also Leo. Actually, Leo. I met him when I went to New York. I think 2017, and yeah. Just to refresh you. So, well, apart from being one of our judges, my judges in Bacardi Legacy in San Francisco,
Yeah.
I think I don't know. I kind of egged you to sing a song, but during that time you had the sore throat of stuff, no? Because I also, you remember that? Yeah, yeah, because especially now, I'm tinkering with my guitar since there's really not much to do, so I'm unlearning stuff. And another thing that connects us is Holland America. Um, when you got on board, so I was still their beverage trainer at the time.
Yep.
So basically, I was dealing with training the bartenders in the well, those bartenders all over the fleet before they get deployed. Yeah, I was training them to the best of the recipe that was given to me about the Blue Florida, the whiskey smash, if I remember it correctly, and all those things, and making sure they know what a Nick and Nora is versus what a rye mixing glass is, basically. So yeah, it was fun times. I'm still pretty much connected with, well, indirectly, I still keep in touch with the local training school because, that's these guys are really close to heart. And yeah, some of them are going home already. Huh? Sorry?
Eric Brown, that we would be speaking this morning, and he was pleased to hear that. Eric is the beverage manager now in the United States. Has he been down there, Eric Brown, to see you?
Sorry, who? Who? Can you
Eric
louden your
Brown?
voice? I can't hear you.
Has Eric Brown been down to see you?
Sorry?
Oh, let me fix this so better now.
The volume, please. A little louder.
Yeah, I got the volume is all the way up. Can you hear me now? Can you?
Maybe the mic.
Well, the microphone is on, I think.
Okay,
Uh,
hold on. Okay, can you speak again?
can you hear me now?
Yeah, perfect. Yeah,
Now, when I put, I'm going to try something. I don't know if you tell me if you can still hear me. Can you hear me when I do that?
yeah,
Good,
yes.
good. I'll get closer so you have a better. No, I was saying Eric Brown is the beverage manager for Holland America, and I told him that we were speaking this morning. He was very pleased to hear that, and I thought he might have visited you down there, but I don't know if you were still working for them at the time.
No, no. Well, I'm not sure. Because I left 2017, and
Ah,
I put up the school because I wanted really to. Well, I moved two steps backward to teach basic stuff before, I said we need more bartenders in the Philippines since everybody's going on the ships anyway. So, there's
yeah,
someone has to be left here in the country, so to
that's right.
speak. So okay, Dale. So maybe let's start with the first basic question. So please tell everyone here who is Dale DeGroff.
Well, you know, I started this whole journey when I left my university and went to New York City, ostensibly to become an yes. And if you spend any time at all in New York City, you learn very, very quickly that most of the life that takes place in New York City takes place in the bars, whether they be neighborhood bars or fancy cocktail lounges or restaurant bars or hotel bars. There are thousands and thousands of them. And I wasn't any exception. I had a nice little neighborhood bar in my, and I began to collect different interesting bars in every neighborhood that I went into. So, over the years, I always found myself, I started as a dishwasher, to tell you the truth, when I first got to town, because I just simply needed a job right away. And I worked at Howard Johnson's in Times Square.
Oh,
And yes, Howard Johnson.
yeah, yeah.
And then I became a waiter. What? What'd you say?
No, I mean I've been to New York. I used to visit the Rainbow Room where you used to work in radio. Well, in Times Square, radio something I forgot. Yeah. But yeah,
It's
it's
a
really
Dirty
too.
Rock.
Yeah, it's the during December. I'm from the Philippines, so I have warm weather, and when I go to New York, I developed this freezer. Well, because if it's too much cold, I develop some rashes, and it's I'd rather stay indoors than
Yeah,
go outside and enjoy the
but the
the
balls
snow
are
and whatnot. Yeah, 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 yeah. Okay. And then yeah, continue. So what else is how Dale DeGroff became Dale DeGroff basically?
well, I had some very, very serendipitous, lucky adventures. My best friend, who was a roommate of mine for a little while in New York, his brother was an advertising man, and he was a partner in a very creative advertising agency. And one of their really special accounts was called Restaurant Associates. Now, Restaurant Associates at the time, and they're still around, were the owners of some of the most expensive and most exclusive restaurants in the city. So,
Mm-hmm.
as a member of the family, kind of, because one of the owners was my best friend's older brother, we had the opportunity to dine and to drink in some of the most exclusive places in New York City, places that where dinner was more than my monthly rent. And
Uh-huh. Yes, yes, yes.
we were hosted by this friend Ron Holland, and in those occasions, I got to meet the president and the creative head of development of Restaurant Associates, and that man's name was Joseph Baum. Joe started way back in 1953 with this project. His vision was, um, first of all, he was in that era, the four-star fancy restaurants were all French and Italian.
Dale, sorry, Dale. Volume. Can you?
Yeah,
I can't hear you already. It's going down.
I'm not sure. I haven't changed anything, so I'm here. Can you hear me? Okay.
No, a little more higher.
I haven't really changed anything, so I mean the volume is
Okay,
all the
hold
way
on,
up.
hold on. Let me do.
I'm not changing anything. The volume's all the way up, so I
Okay,
don't know.
cool.
I
All
don't know.
right. Yeah, this is good now. Yeah, go ahead. Continue, please.
So anyway,
So you,
this
the group of
gentleman was,
restaurants.
yeah, he was a genius. This guy. He began back in the 50s. In 1959, he opened the Four Seasons restaurant, which was a seasonally changing cuisine, which was very unusual in the United States at the time because we were just in the process of developing TV dinners and fast food and supermarkets with lots of canned and processed stuff. So the idea of a fine dining restaurant that was using fresh and seasonal was a very unusual idea at the time.
So
Uh,
which timeline is this? We're talking of what? The 90s? Are we
50,
talking of the
59, 60, 61. In
Oh,
1960, Joe opened another restaurant called La Fonda del Sol, and it was a
oh.
celebration of Latin foods from South America, Peru, Brazil, Central America, the Caribbean, and it was extraordinary. This is 1960, remember. And on his menu of drinks in 1960, he had four tequila drinks, three mezcal drinks. He had the mojito. He had the pisco sour. 1960. The guy was a
1960.
vision. He was way ahead of the
Wow,
pack. This is the guy
wow.
that I went to work for finally in 1984. He was my mentor. He's the one that introduced me to the idea of not his vision was a new American cuisine, and his vision also was putting wine in front of every guest. And third part of that vision was to go back to the classic pre-prohibition American cocktails. The
But that's
first
amazing. 1960. Wow.
the first culinary art form, as my business partner, author, and friend David Wondrich, who I'm sure you know, David
Yes.
called cocktails America's first culinary art form. So that's what Joe wanted.
Wow.
He wanted dishes with tradition at the Rainbow Room, and he wanted cocktails with tradition. And that's how I got started on that long road to where I am today.
Okay, okay. Well, okay. Talking about the Rainbow Room, because you were credited with reviving the classic cocktails, albeit the Cosmopolitan, right? If correct me if
Mostly
I'm
like
wrong.
Ramos Fizz and the Sazerac and the Between the Sheets and the Stinger and all these cocktails that had been kind of forgotten and left by the wayside. The Negroni, I had my Negroni on my menu right at the beginning in 1989. So this was a opportunity for people to taste cocktails that had really fallen out of use after Prohibition, and they were
But
thrifty.
what gave you that idea or that motivation to revive the classics after the
Joe,
prohibition?
Joe,
Oh, okay,
Joe.
okay, okay,
Yeah,
okay,
he said to
okay. So
me,
it's
I'll
very
give you an example. He
it's
said to
true.
me, I want to have a classic beverage program. He said, I want you to go get a book called How to Mix Drinks by Jerry Thomas. So I
Yeah,
walked over to
okay.
Fifth Avenue. I walked over to Fifth Avenue and went to a couple of bookstores, and nobody had this book. And one of the most exclusive bookstores, which is now closed, was called Scribner's after the publisher. And the
Okay.
bookseller at Scribner's looked at me and he said, I've never heard of it, but let me look at the old and rare catalog. So he looked at the old and rare catalog and he said, I get it now. This book was published in 1862. You're not going to find it in a bookstore, he said. Eventually I found it, and this and other reading is what started me down the road to use those old fashioned techniques and old fashioned cocktails.
Okay, okay, okay. So, all right. I'm just curious. So, are you New York based? Were you born and raised in New York?
No, no, no. My dad was a Navy pilot. I lived everywhere from the South Pacific. I lived in the Kwajalein Atoll, not too far from you down there in the Philippines. There's the
Ah.
Marshall Islands, the Marshall Islands. I lived there when I was an infant. And then I lived all over the United States. I lived in Morocco. I lived in Spain. This was all because of my father. As a teenager, I finally went to university, and then I went to New York my third year of university, and I stayed in New York for most of the next 10 years. And then I went to Los Angeles and stayed for about 6 years. Met my wife. Both of my sons were born in Hollywood Presbyterian. And then we came back to New York. And so I really, most of my adult life has been in New York, yes.
I see. Okay, so why did you basically pursue bartending? I mean, you mentioned a while ago that you started as a waiter, right? But is that really top of mind during those times?
I love drinks. I love the bars of New York. I spent a lot of time in the bars of New York, either as a waiter, whatever, as a drinker. I saw that the bartenders were kind of the boss. They seemed to be making pretty good money. And so, as a bartender, I mean, as a waiter, the first opportunity I got to tend bar was when it was a very fancy place I was working in as a waiter. It was called Charlie O's. And the
Okay.
it was created by my mentor, Joe Baum. It sounds like an Irish place, and it was, but it was on a very high level. It was in Rockefeller Center, also where the Rainbow Room is. And Rockefeller Center has 11 buildings. The Rainbow Room.
Yes, yes, I see that. That's why I think every New Year's Eve, that's where the celebration is, right? And yeah,
Well,
that part of town.
Times Square is New Year's Eve. Christmas is Rockefeller Center because they put the giant Christmas tree in the middle of Rock.
Ah, okay. All right,
So,
all right, all right.
well, I was tending bar, and the restaurant associates sold Charlie O's to an independent operator whose father was a big politico. In other words, stay as a bartender at Gracie Mansion when he got the keys to the city. One of
Well,
the
but how does that work? How were you given the keys to the city? How I mean, I've been
they,
hearing that in the movie.
let me explain. Like if you go to Toronto and you are a visiting celebrity or a visiting political guest, the mayor of Toronto will give you a white cowboy hat, and you become
Mm-hmm.
a member of the White Hat Society. Every time you go to Toronto, you bring your little white hat. For leading citizens and certain celebrities, maybe some politicians of note, the mayor will throw them a party and give them a symbolic key to the city. Your city, here's the key. It's not a
So
real
the
key.
perk of
It doesn't
that.
open, but you know what I'm saying.
So, but what's the perk of that? I mean, what are the perks of having the key?
It's an honor. Just like getting the White House in Toronto is an honor. You're being honored as a special citizen of New York or a special citizen of Toronto, you know.
Nice, nice, nice. Wow, wow. Okay, so since we're talking about New York, I mean, I've been very blessed to be able to go to New York twice in this lifetime already. But why is it that New York is considered like the one of the go-to places or the mecca when it comes to cocktails or bartending?
Well, I don't know if you've traveled in Europe
Not
or
yet, not yet.
any, if you go around the world, lots of bars, like for example, the American bar at the a hotel in
Savoy.
Paris, and there's an American bar in every significant hotel in Europe. You know, the American
Okay.
bar, or there's Harry's New York bar in Paris where you can get a Bloody Mary and a hot dog. But what happened was because the whole idea of the bar, even from the height of the bar and the brass rail and the stools, everything about it was these fixtures, the drinks themselves. It was all very American, you know. Uh, there's a very early definition of the cocktail from 1806 because you know the cocktail is made up of parts. I mean, you know, it's a composite beverage, and so are the people of the United States. They come from all over the world. And when they came here in the beginning, they brought to the United States their traditions of beer making and wine making and whiskey making and distilling. And in America, we took those traditions, we put them all together in one glass and we called it a cocktail. This was the American tradition. We exported that back to the world, you know. So this whole American, and that first definition back in 1806 in the Balance and Columbian Repository, you know what I'm talking about. It's a
Yeah.
famous definition.
Mm.
In a short sentence, cocktail is strong spirits of any kind, sugar, water, and bitters, also known as a bittered sling.
Mm, mm. Yes. Yes.
Sling, which was an older style beverage in colonial America, was really a poor man's punch because the fashionable beverage of the era from the 17th and the 18th century was the punch bowl. The punch
Yes.
bowl
Yes.
was a high class, wealthy cocktail event. I use the word cocktail loosely here. It was a social event that took place around a bowl of alcoholic mixture called punch that had five ingredients: one strong, one weak, one strong, one spicy, and one sweet. You know, one of
Okay. All
two of
right.
sweet, three of four. You know, you've heard the old rhyme. Uh, uh, I think it was a one of strong, two of sweet, no, I'm sorry. One of sour, two of sweet, three of strong, four of weak.
Yeah.
By
Okay.
sunset,
The punch.
you have a bowl of punch. So what was
Yes.
the
Yes.
cocktail? Because we couldn't afford all the fancy spices, you know, nutmeg, which used to go on top of the punch, was extraordinarily expensive because it came from the Banda Islands down by you. So people had to sail
Mm.
half all the way around the world to bring those nutmegs back to England, back to Europe. They used to say that if a sailor could have a little bag of those little nutmeg berries when he arrived back in London, he could actually retire. That's how expensive these things were. They were
Wow. During those days. Huh?
they used to strip search the sailors going off the sailing ships coming from the Banda Islands to make sure they weren't stealing any of the nutmeg berries, you know.
Oh. Okay.
So
Wow.
we couldn't afford it. We were like the poor cousins over on the other side of the Atlantic. We couldn't afford these expensive ingredients. And oh, and by the way, lemons. This is a critical part of punch to make the shrub they're based on. Lemons were
Yes.
hard to come by up in New England. maybe they didn't grow up there, so they had to come by ship. And they spoiled easily, so they were very difficult to export. So what we had was we had the strong, we had the weak, we had the sweet because we could get sugar, but we didn't have the spice and we didn't have the sour. So we would use
Okay.
vinegar. We would use vinegar for the sour. That's why
Okay. Yeah.
you hear about vinegar shrubs. But the vinegar shrubs
Yes,
are
the shrub.
because we couldn't get lemons. So I recommend that people make their shrubs out of lemons and not vinegar, by the way, because it's hard to really make a vinegar shrub and make it well so that the drink doesn't taste like vinegar. So
Yes.
anyway, this sling was an American poor man's punch. But then somebody figured out how to get that spice flavor into alcohol by infusing the alcohol with the spice flavors. So then when they took that ingredient, which was a liquid ingredient infused with spice, and they dashed it into the sling, voila, we have a cocktail, So
Nice. Nice. Yeah.
that's how it came together.
Okay. All right. So basically, the reason I ask is because even me, I mean, since I watched Tom Cruise in Cocktails, right? The Fridays thing, and it's in New York. So it's I've always really wondered, and actually when I went to New York, I know it's really a mix of different concepts, and everybody is really striving for each identity, whether it's in Upper Manhattan, whether it's in Brooklyn, whether it's in East Village, Greenwich, whatever, as far as I can remember. So it's you really get to learn different concepts and different from different bars, and plus the drinks that they were making. So okay, let's move fast forward. From this COVID, the pandemic that we're experiencing right now, how did that start basically? Because it's well, it's surprising but not surprising at the same time. New York, actually, you have a lot of incidents or people affected with the COVID. Can you tell us how, how did that came about?
Well, my friend, nature is uh, extraordinarily varied and extraordinarily interesting and extraordinarily complex. And living things, um, this happens to be a perfect little machine, a perfect tiny little living thing that is extraordinarily successful in multiplying itself. It's extraordinarily successful in moving from one living being to another, whether it's an animal to an animal, then an animal to a human being, and then human being to human being. It travels easily and is extraordinarily successful once it's in its host. And we had no control over it, my friend. You just needed to be in the same room with somebody because from their breath alone, from the moisture on their breath, the room is becoming more and more concentrated with this tiny little living thing, which only has to land
Yeah,
on your
yeah,
eye or in your nose or on your hand, and then you touch your eye, whatever. We have no control over this. Borders mean nothing. Nationality means nothing. Race means nothing. This is
exactly.
an opportunistic living thing that is extraordinarily successful in its design, and it's
Okay.
mutating. It's mutating at the same time.
But
So we
is
never
there
had a
any?
chance. We are so tightly concentrated in the city of New York that we
Yeah.
had a chance. Of course, it's going to be racing through the population.
Mm, mm. But I'm just curious. In the bar industry, I don't know if it's safe to ask this, but were there some people really affected with the COVID with all the bartenders in New York?
Yeah, we had some, and there are probably many that I don't know about. There's thousands and thousands and thousands of bartenders here, but in the community of craft bartenders, which is one that I'm kind of very close to. The one of the noted bartenders, Toby Cecchini, who wrote the book Cosmopolitan. Do you know Toby?
Yeah.
Toby
Yes,
had a Long
yes.
Island bar. Toby was very, very ill for
Oh, no.
weeks, but he's okay. He's recovering nicely now.
Okay.
Uh,
Okay.
we haven't had any. I don't think any of the communities that I'm close with, we haven't had any mortality. I'm happy to say, but we have had some people that have become very sick. I've been isolating, and I'm 71 years old. I got a big target on my back that says COVID-19. Because I'm right in that age group. And so Jill and I
Yeah.
have been in this house for 6 weeks. We're going to be going out somewhat because we sold the house. We put the house on the market before the virus arrived, and we are
Oh, okay.
closing
Okay.
on Monday and moving to Connecticut to a new home. So we're going to be
Are you moving? Are you
somewhat
moving
close.
cities or you just moving to the countryside? Are you
No,
moving to a
we're
different?
moving 2.5 hours out of the city, and mostly because our parents are elderly and we're going to be closer to them.
Oh, okay. Okay. No, that's good. That's
Yeah.
that's how it should be anyway. Okay.
I've
Okay.
been in New York since
Um.
68, 69. So with a
Mhm.
short vacation out in California for 6 years. So I love New York. It's been my home for many, many, many years. Jill was born and raised in New York, and I will come back all the time. It's a short train ride, 2.5 hours to get here from where I'll be. There's a lot of people that commute to New York City to work from Pennsylvania and from the end of Long Island, the 2 hour commute every morning and every evening. So it's not that big of a deal. I'll still be within very close distance. But my work is a lot on the road now. You know that. I work for Holland America. I work for William Grant. I'm going from city to city. We have the Bar Smarts program, my partners and I,
Yeah.
Beverage Alcohol Resource, and we have our master's program, which does take place in New York once a year. I'll come back
So
for that.
it's so your contract is still live with Holland America. You're still with them basically.
Yeah, this is my fifth year with them. Yeah, and
All
I
right. All
I
right.
sold the cruises, so I'm giving them virtual virtual content to disperse among their passengers who are unable to travel now. So they're getting a lot of virtual content out, like everybody is. I'm doing the one
Nice. Nice. Yeah.
evolution of the martini. I did a tiki, wonderful tiki. It was set up like a PowerPoint, but it was really
Mm-hmm.
uh, something you could go through it, and there were stops along the way where you could stop and make a cocktail and then move on. And you learned about Victor Bergeron, you learned about Victor Beaumont Gant, who was Don Beach, and you learned about the evolution of this whole tropical drink thing. And now I'm going to do the evolution of the martini, going all the way back to 1888 when Harry Johnson first published the recipe for a martini and how it changed and evolved over the years. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
we'll send it out over the internet for the cruising pass
Okay.
who are no longer able to cruise. And
All
then
right.
we go back to cruising in the fall.
Well, hopefully, I mean, it's I mean, like now, most of the Holland America ships are still around either San Diego or Florida, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah,
And
pretty much
they,
sitting in port, not doing much. It's
yeah, well, they're literally just floating around. And they might be back in the Philippines sometime mid-May.
Yeah, I don't think
So
anybody will actually be booking cruises. There might be some deadhead cruises. In other words, just the crew. It's if they want to move the ships around. But this virus, eventually they're going to have probably a pretty successful vaccine, maybe 18 months. But in the meantime, there are other ways of avoiding it. Uh, as the immunity will build up as the virus diminishes among
yeah,
people, and that'll be helpful. Uh,
yeah,
the only thing is you have to be a little nervous about next fall, about maybe another round of the virus before we have the vaccine finished,
yeah, yeah.
vaccination. Uh, so it's kind of iffy. It could be an 18-month window before anybody is really doing a lot of cruising. I would
Yeah,
expect,
yeah,
you know.
yeah. Okay, so let's move forward. So how do you think? COVID changes the dynamics of the New York bartending scene and the bartending scene in general?
Well, the weaker, sadly, the less financially stable uh, businesses will close and probably not reopen. Um, that's sad. Some will reopen. I think the dynamic of the bar restaurant uh, category will be different. You already have a pretty slim profit margin. I think there'll be a lot of emphasis on the bar. They'll thin out the tables in the dining room so they're farther apart for a while, as a way of continuing kind of a social distancing. You'll see fewer tables and they'll be farther apart. The bars themselves, it's it's pretty close contact, so maybe I don't know how that's going to work, but we'll see, won't we? I mean, I know that it's going to be a little bit more difficult to bring all the employees back because there'll be diminished business for a while. So it's definitely going to be a rough period, just like it was in this country after 9/11. It was a good 18 months before the hospitality industry recovered from 9/11 in New York, simply because people were not in the mood to party. They were not in the mood,
Okay.
and a lot of people were financially strapped. But now this is worldwide. This is worldwide. It's
Yeah.
not city, so you're
Yeah.
going to see this repeating itself in city after city. We may lose some of our, favorite bars, but other ones will open. I mean, other ones will.
So you're still pretty much optimistic that
Yeah,
COVID or no COVID, it's still
yeah.
okay.
I
All
have to
right.
tell you a bit of irony. I published The Craft of the Cocktail in 2002. I wrote it in 2000 and 2001. 9/11 happened right after I turned in the manuscript, and it was too late to make any additional words. So
Mm-hmm.
we went to press without me even mentioning in the book in 2002 this massive event that happened in our country. So this
Mm-hmm.
time now, the new Craft of the Cocktail will be published September 22nd of this year, and I made sure in the new introduction to this volume to go back and talk about what I felt happened to my industry back in 2001 during 9/11, and I talked about it in the sense of how the craft cocktail movement, which was evolving at that time, was able to overcome that in the city of New York, was overcome that hurdle and really become a strong movement, the craft cocktail movement. Now here we are. I've just turned in my manuscript right before the COVID virus hit. I'm in the same position that I was in, with no ability to even mention or in any way make any allusion to this disaster. So I was quipping to my wife that I better not write another book because who knows, the four horsemen of the apocalypse might appear on the
Yeah.
horizon.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. Yes.
Anyway,
Yes. Yes.
it is ironic to say the least. I thought that first book would be very unsuccessful because no one would be in a mood for partying around cocktails, but I was completely wrong. It is still selling really well now, and I have been making money off it every year since 4 years after it was published, and I paid off the advance that I got. So I won't make any judgments about this. I would like to think that the new Craft of the Cocktail will also be successful, but it's coming into the market at a very difficult time.
Yeah, you have a lot. Well, like I said, I have your book. I have your book, and then actually we have a lot of Filipinos who have crafted the cocktail, so that's why people were really looking forward, and they were surprised when I posted that you're going to grace our Toma Sessions. Okay,
Well,
so let's go now to some of the initial questions of some of the viewers, because we have this um, I would say part of our bartending media. It's called Drink Manila. So these are the initial questions. So first is, um, okay, what is Dale? This is a personal question. What are your three favorite cocktails? Do you have
Uh,
a top three?
I'm a gin martini drinker. Um, I I I like a Manhattan, and I like a version of the mint julep, which is kind of my own drink, where I add lemon to a mint julep uh, and turn it into kind of a sour. I called it the whiskey smash. You know it because you drink
Yes, yes,
there.
yes,
Uh,
yes.
so those three drinks are very high on my list of drinks. But that of course opens a large door because you know the gin martini is now evolving rapidly.
Yeah, I missed that. I missed your session. I missed your martini debate. I was supposed to view that. Yeah, I'm sure it was great.
So, for
Yeah.
example, the martini that I was drinking, I'll give you a little preview. It was made with the new bottling coming from Hendrix called Orbium.
Oh wow.
It has
Okay, shout out.
it's it's
We have one of our viewers is brand ambassador of William Grant and Son. So Shalom, do you know this Hendrix? Dale, can you flash the bottle again, please?
it'll be coming to the regular markets pretty soon. It has uh, it has quinine, it has wormwood, and instead of rose, it has a different flower. Um, it has the flower from ancient Egypt. Jill, what's the flower from ancient Egypt? Lotus blossom. Lotus blossom. So it's a
Yeah.
little different profile. It's a little bit more bitter because of the quinine and the wormwood, but it's good for martinis. And also in my martini that day, I had my bitters.
Of course. Building our bitters. Yes,
Okay?
yes, 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 yes.
And my 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 partner in the bitters is Ted Bro, and Ted Bro makes. Can you see that?
The mist.
So I have a little spritz of absinthe, nice, on top.
Nice.
The vermouth
Mm-hmm.
is Ambrato, which is a new Blanc style vermouth from Martini. Very spicy and has a little additional sweetness like all Blanc vermouths have. And the dry vermouth is from Dolan. So I do equal parts and then a dash of bitters and a spritz of this. See what I mean by the Martini evolving? It's really, really wonderful to see. And the 50-50 Martini is back. So this is 50-50. It's half Orbian, half vermouth, and the vermouth is divided in half between a dry and a blanc. So the martini is still growing and evolving even now. It's not just gin and dry vermouth anymore. We've gone back to that turn of the century 1900, 1899, when gin and vermouth were used in equal parts in the first dry
Okay. Okay.
dash of orange bitters. They called it the fitty fitty even back then, and that craft movement brought that idea back. If you went to Pegu Club, that Audrey Saunders had the fitty fitty on her menu when she opened Pegu Club in 2003 or whatever it was. Audrey's an old friend and a woman
Yeah,
who
yeah.
studied with me.
Robert Hess, right? Robert Hess, Audrey Sanders.
Drinkboy.com. He was
Yeah,
a
yeah. Robert Hess. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
he's a Microsoft executive.
All right. Okay, with regards to your bitters, the Dale DeGroff bitters, do you think you have already a distributor in Manila? Because I don't think you're here yet.
No, I had one in Australia. They bought a pallet, and he was going to sell some of it in the Philippines, but he never ordered another pallet, so I don't know. You can still get it in Australia, but I don't think you can get it in the Philippines. If you wanted to, if somebody was interested, just write me.
Yeah,
At,
we'll discuss after. I'm actually quite interested in
we
moving forward. Okay.
we
Um,
originated in France. We're
yeah.
making it in Louisville, Kentucky now. We moved our.
Ah,
We used to make it at Combier in Saumur, France, but it was getting too expensive, so we made a deal with Sazerac Company in Louisville, Kentucky, and we're going
Yeah.
to be making it there. Head is still getting the same botanicals, the same process, month-long infusion of whole botanicals ground up. So it'll be exactly the same, but we'll be doing it in Louisville, Kentucky. Much easier for us and much less expensive to ship it around. Uh,
All right. All right. Okay.
Continue to make his
Uh,
over there.
okay. So, all right. Question number two. What are the highlights and the watershed moments of Dale DeGroff?
Well, obviously, when I met Joe and went to work for him, changed my life completely. Uh, Getting to work at Hotel Bel Air in 1978, one of the top 10 hotels in the world. I went out to Los Angeles in my 1969 Dodge Dart. I drove across the country. I got there. Somebody told me, hey, I heard a rumor that they fired the day bartender over at the great Hotel Bel Air. I drove my car over there. I parked it at the valet parking. I walked right into it's not a normal hotel. It's all little bungalows and it's beautiful Japanese gardens. It's one of the great hotels of the world. And I found the bar. You had to go around a little path. And I walked in, and this big, tall, red-faced Irishman who was the head bartender was not supposed to be there. He worked in the office normally. And I just walked in and said, hi, I used to work at Charlie O's in New York, and I hear you're looking for a day man. Now, that was 1978. You couldn't
Wow.
do that today. You couldn't do that today. Today, you would have to go through the assistant human relations department down in Westwood in an office somewhere, and maybe the human resources person might finally get your resume. You might get a call with an interview, and if that happened, which was unlikely probably, then maybe you might get an interview with somebody over at the hotel, a beverage manager, and then maybe, but this, I went right into the bar, and the head bartender was right behind the bar. He said, step behind the bar, young man. And he said, pour me a shot, make me a sidecar. Tasted it. Says, okay, come back tomorrow morning, black pants, white shirt. We've got the jacket. We'll give you a couple of days tryout. That's all there is
Nice.
to it.
Nice.
That doesn't happen.
Nice. Wow.
Now you got to get an FBI background check. You got to go through all kinds of hoops and all kinds of. So I had a lucky career, my friend. I walked into one of the great hotels in the world. That changed my life. I had
Yeah,
stuff
you're
at that bar I had never seen before. So the head bartender was not a dummy. He showed me when I arrived the next morning. He said, I'm going to divide this bar up into thirds. 1/3 over here. I want these polished on Monday and Tuesday. Wednesday, you do the middle section. Thursday, Friday, I want these bottles to look like gems, Mr. Gems. Do you understand me? And the ones on top, too. Don't forget those. So what do? You take your rag, then you start reading the label, and then, you're wondering what it is. And then maybe you'll do, a little taste,
yeah.
He was no dummy, this guy. He knew I didn't know, he knew I was wet behind the ears. He knew I needed to pick up every one of those bottles and study them. And that's how he did it.
No, your era was really something else. I mean, if I could have lived during your era, I mean, I'm pretty sure things would really off the charts then. So,
Son, I
yeah.
got to tell you a story about that. In 1969, when I arrived in New York, I was a jazz fan. I used to go to New York jazz clubs, and that's the first thing I did when I got to New York. I went to a New York jazz club. It was an amazing experience. So I'm sitting in a little neighborhood bar up on 69th Street in Columbus Avenue. It's an old man's bar. A lot of old men during the day, an old man runs it, and one of those kind of bars. And I'm striking up a conversation with the old man next to me. I said, wow, I had a great night last night. He said, yeah, what did you do? I said, I went to this jazz club called, I can't remember now. And he said, you should have seen my New York. This is shit. You should have seen my New York. You know what, Richie? At that moment in my head, I said, I'll never be this guy. I'll never say, you should have seen my New York, because this guy was such a pain in the ass. I'm trying to tell him, share my enthusiasm with him, and all he can come back with, yeah, you should, that's nothing. You should have seen my New York.
Nothing.
I don't want to be that guy, ever.
Very narrow, very
But let me tell you, Lee,
close-minded
my
guy.
era, my era is now, my friend. Every day I live is my era. Today is just as much my era as 1969 was. You are
Yeah, exactly.
contemporary with everything that is happening while you are alive, my friend.
Yeah, no, I mean, you can't complain. I mean, that's why, like, I was chatting with a friend. I mean, if I can live longer or live as much as Dale DeGroff, then I'll be a happy man. You
Hey,
experienced a lot of decades,
I'm
so
only
it's
71. My grandfather was 97 when he died. You know,
uh,
hope to get a couple more years. I should have taken better care of myself, maybe, but here I am
yeah, yeah, yeah.
at
Of course,
71.
of course, of course, of course. Especially now. I mean, all right. Okay. So next question.